What if I told you that this moment, this exact second, was not random? What if I told you it was prepared? Not by chance, but by the silent pull of destiny. What if, right now, you are standing at a crossroads you've been moving toward your entire life, and this speech is the turning point? You did not find this by accident. You were meant to hear it, because something inside you has grown tired of silence, tired of drifting, tired of waiting. And that something, the voice of your other self, reached out. It pulled this speech into your orbit because it knows you're ready. You may not feel ready. You may still wrestle with doubt, but readiness has nothing to do with feeling. It has everything to do with decision. And today, you decide. This is not merely a speech. This is a spiritual interruption, a divine collision between the man you've been and the man you're becoming. And if you stay with me, not halfway, not distracted, but fully, it will change the rhythm of your life. But I must warn you, this change will not come because of what I say once. It will come from what you repeat again and again, because repetition is how your mind is shaped. Your subconscious mind, the soil of all results, does not respond to inspiration. It responds to auto-suggestion, to the words spoken repeatedly with belief until they sink into your being and replace every doubt you once called truth. So I urge you, don't just listen to this speech, study it, repeat it, live it. Let these words become the new language of your inner world. The great ones I studied, Andrew Carnegie, Henry Ford, Thomas Edison, Charles Schwab, Abraham Lincoln, they all shared one thing in common. They controlled the language within. They repeated belief until fear had no place left to grow. Ford said, whether you think you can or think you can't, you're right. Why? Because belief repeated is belief installed. And belief, once installed, becomes destiny. So if you want to become the man you know you're meant to be, then this isn't a speech you hear once. It's the voice you play on your darkest days. It's the rhythm you rise to every morning. It's the compass you follow when the world goes quiet. And most importantly, it's the fire you return to until it becomes yours. This is not entertainment. This is your reprogramming. And if you stay with me from the first word to the last, the man who finishes this speech will not be the same as the one who began it. Because today, we are not just talking about change. We are changing. And let us begin. There's a voice in you that never quite goes away. It doesn't shout. It doesn't argue. But it insists, quietly, consistently. It insists that you were made for more. Even when you bury it under excuses, under the noise of the world, under the weight of routine, it doesn't die. It waits. It whispers. And today, it's grown louder because something inside you is waking up, not just because you're tired of fear, not just because you're exhausted from delay, but because the voice inside is tired of being ignored. You see, I have spent decades studying the lives of the most successful men this world has ever produced. Men who were not born with brilliance, but who built it. Henry Ford, born on a farm, surrounded by doubt with no great education, still dared to build an empire. Why? Because he listened to that voice. He once said, I am looking for a lot of men who have an infinite capacity to not know what can't be done. And that begins with one thing, believing the whisper more than the world. The world will always give you a reason to settle, a reason to wait, a reason to doubt. It will offer logic dressed as fear and fear dressed as caution. But that voice inside you, it doesn't care what the world thinks. It only cares about one thing, the man you were meant to become. And until you move, until you decide, that voice will remain unsettled. I believe you feel it now. It's why you've listened this far, because deep down you're no longer satisfied with being half awake. You are no longer content with repeating yesterday. You've tried distraction. You've tried comfort. You've tried waiting. And still the whisper remains, a whisper that says, I am not done yet. I am not this version of myself. There is more for me, and I will not die with this music still in me. Do you understand how rare that is? Do you understand how many men silence that voice permanently? They drown it in approval, in laziness, in hesitation. They learn to cope with mediocrity. But not you, not anymore, because this moment and this speech is a reckoning, a confrontation between the man you were and the man who's rising. And the man who's rising has no interest in shallow goals or borrowed dreams. He doesn't care for applause. He doesn't crave comfort. He is after transformation. That is why you must repeat this speech. Because the voice that led you here, it needs reinforcement. Daily, hourly, constantly. If you do not feed it, the world will drown it out. But if you do, if you speak to it with clarity, with fire, with repetition, it will become the dominant voice in your mind. And once that happens, the world no longer gets to tell you who you are. Andrew Carnegie once told me, a man's thought, spoken with belief and repeated with discipline, will become the law of his life. That is not poetry, that is law. So let this be your new law. You repeat this voice. You rehearse it. You let these words become the rhythm of your morning and the foundation of your night. You let the new belief bury the old man. Because this is the real war. Not against the world, not against others, but against the part of you that still clings to the lie that you're not ready. You are ready, not because you feel it, but because you decided. And decision is where all power begins. You were meant to find this for a reason. Now you must become the reason. Let us go deeper. There is a moment in every man's life that splits the story in two. Before the decision and after. Not a decision made in passing, not a decision made with convenience, but a decision made so fully, so absolutely that everything which came before it begins to fade like a dream, and everything after becomes clear like steel. And I tell you this, you are standing in that moment right now. The moment where the man you've been must bow to the man you've decided to become. The world calls it change. But the men I studied, the builders, the giants, the titans, they knew better. They called it identity. And identity begins where hesitation ends. Charles M. Schwab, the man Andrew Carnegie trusted to lead an empire, was not the most brilliant man in every room. He didn't hold the most degrees. He didn't waste time debating the weather before planting his seed. He moved, he acted, he decided. And because he moved when others paused, spoke when others waited, committed when others hesitated, he became indispensable. Why? Because he understood what most never learn, that decisiveness is not just a habit. It is a declaration to the subconscious mind. It is how you tell yourself, this is who I am now. And the moment that declaration is made, the mind goes to work making it true. But what happens when that decision is delayed? Fear multiplies. Doubt creeps in like smoke under the door. You start asking small questions. You start shrinking your vision. You start hoping for permission instead of walking in power. And before you know it, you are not living. You are rehearsing how to stay the same. So I ask you now, what decision have you postponed? Is it the decision to speak with conviction, to lead with presence, to walk away from environments that suffocate your potential, to stop apologizing for the fire that won't leave you alone? Because every day you delay that decision, you train your mind to tolerate the life you were never meant to live. Let me be clear with you. You cannot wait for certainty and expect to build greatness. Certainty comes after the decision, not before. This is why Henry Ford, when faced with the impossible task of creating an 8-cylinder engine in a single block, told his engineers, build it anyway. And when they returned with failure, he said again, build it anyway. Not because he was stubborn, but because he had already decided. And that one decision pulled a future from the unseen into reality. That is how power works. It doesn't tiptoe, it doesn't debate, it doesn't ask the committee of public opinion to sign off first, it decides. And because it decides, the universe begins to organize around it. You say you want transformation? Then choose it, not with emotion, with finality. Say it aloud, not as wish, but as command. I have already decided. I do not drift, I do not delay, I do not explain. Because the man who hesitates teaches his mind that his word is not law. But the man who moves without waiting, without flinching, without broadcasting his every thought, trains his mind to obey. And once your mind believes that you are in charge, fear has no more power. Let me remind you, Thomas Edison didn't invent the light bulb because he was patient. He invented it because he was relentless. Every failed experiment was not a reason to pause. It was a signal to proceed. He had already chosen, he had already written the end of the story. He was simply walking his way there. And that's what I want for you. No more wondering it, no more asking, no more pacing the room with a heavy heart hoping something will change. You change it today. Now, this moment is a dividing line. On one side, all the hesitation, all the fear, all the old stories about who you were. On the other, the man who doesn't flinch, who doesn't fold, who doesn't wait to be told he's ready. Let that man rise, let him speak. Let him take the next step, not tomorrow, not when he feels more prepared. Now, you don't need a plan, you need a pattern. And the pattern begins with movement. Because every time you move, you teach your subconscious, I am the kind of man who follows through. And that teaching becomes identity. And identity becomes destiny. So from this day forward, you decide quickly, you act decisively, you commit fully. No more drifting, no more wondering, no more maybe. The voice inside you has been waiting for this moment, waiting for you to say, this is the man I am now, and I do not look back. Let us continue. Discipline is the invisible hand that builds empires. Drift is the silent wind that tears them down. Every man must choose daily which one he will serve. For both demand allegiance, but only one leads to freedom. Drift is not loud. It doesn't announce itself with a crash. It creeps. It seduces. It offers comfort and delay, and asks for nothing up front, but takes everything in the end. Drift will let you feel intelligent for pausing. It will let you call your hesitation strategy. It will whisper, let's think this through one more time, and while you're thinking, your opportunity vanishes like smoke. But discipline is the language of the builders. It is not emotional. It is not concerned with motivation. It shows up when you do. It keeps its promises. It ignores the noise. It executes, not because it feels like it, but because it said it would. And in that sacred consistency, a man begins to change. He stops being a collection of opinions, fears, and half-finished efforts, and becomes something else entirely, unshakable. Let me take you to the life of Andrew Carnegie, a man I studied closely. He wasn't born into luxury. He didn't inherit fortune. He began as a boy in a telegraph office, running errands and learning Morse code by listening to the clicks and clacks. And yet, by the time his life reached full bloom, he controlled more wealth than the crowned heads of Europe. Was it luck? Was it privilege? No, it was discipline. He studied relentlessly. He developed the habit of observation. He trained his mind to focus. While others gossiped, he read. While others celebrated mediocrity, he studied power. He wrote down his thoughts. He planned. He spoke less and acted more. And when opportunities appeared, he did not question whether he was ready. His discipline had already prepared him. He moved and he won. This is not theory, this is law. And the same was true for Charles Schwab, who started humbly and rose to become the president of U.S. Steel. Schwab was not the most technical man in the company. He wasn't the strongest mathematician or the most gifted engineer, but he was the most consistent, the most driven, the most disciplined. He arrived early. He demanded excellence, not only from others, but first from himself. He led by presence, by certainty, by commitment. And people followed him, not because of his charisma alone, but because discipline had carved him into a man of weight, a man of decision, a man who said what he would do and then did it. Can you say the same? Are you a man who keeps his own word when no one is watching? Or do you wait for energy, for inspiration, for applause? Because here's the truth that most never face. If you only act when it's easy, you're not in control. You are a servant to emotion. You are a slave to your environment, and you are drifting. But the man of discipline, he acts anyway. He wakes up early, not because he loves mornings, but because his mission demands a head start. He speaks his vision aloud, not because he needs reassurance, but because he is installing belief. He practices repetition, not because he is weak, but because he understands how strength is built. You think Thomas Edison worked only when he was inspired? He built laboratories not of comfort, but of ritual. He didn't rely on random bursts of creativity. He built routines. He trained his assistants. He filled notebooks with tests and trials and failures, and he worked with the precision of a man obsessed with excellence. 10,000 failures did not stop him. Why? Because discipline had become his home. And fear cannot live in a disciplined mind. Fear needs chaos. Fear needs inconsistency. Fear needs a mind that treats its purpose like a hobby. Discipline starves fear. It chokes it. It gives it no space to grow. This is what I need you to understand. If your days are not structured by intention, they are structured by drift. If you do not rule your hours, your fears will. You must decide now what your days look like, what you will speak, what you will do, what you will no longer tolerate, because until your daily behavior reflects your deepest belief, your results will reflect your old identity. Let me ask you this, as I once asked the young men I mentored, if someone followed you for 24 hours and they weren't allowed to hear your words, only observe your actions, would they be able to tell what your purpose is? Would they be able to guess what you're building? Would your discipline speak louder than your silence? Because if not, it is time to rebuild. And you rebuild not in theory, but in ritual. Every morning you rise before the world gets noisy. You speak your aim aloud, you rehearse your vision with intensity, you plan your movement with purpose, and you act without delay, without debate, without the permission of mood. This is not punishment. This is not grind. This is freedom. Discipline is the only freedom a man will ever truly know, because it is the only thing that keeps his mind and body from being ruled by fear. Abraham Lincoln, during the darkest days of the Civil War, did not allow chaos to dictate his decisions. He moved with solemnity, with clarity, with discipline. He wrote, he read, he walked in solitude. He carried the nation not with noise, but with stillness. That is discipline in its highest form. And now it is your turn. Not to imitate these men, but to follow the principle, to walk with discipline into a version of yourself that fear cannot touch, to stop waiting for the storm to pass and begin training in the rain, to stop chasing motivation and become the man who no longer needs it. This is not for the crowd. This is for you. Say it aloud. I am not ruled by feelings. I am ruled by my decisions. I do not drift. I decide. My rituals build my power. My discipline is my identity. And say it not once, not twice, but every day. Let this part of the speech be the mirror you return to when you are tempted to take it easy, to skip the hard thing, to make an excuse. Because the man who repeats this, the man who lets discipline carve his life, just becomes impossible to shake, impossible to stop, impossible to fear. Let us now continue. Everything you are today, your confidence, your hesitation, your fears, your drive, all of it has been shaped by one thing: repetition. Not chance, not genetics, not fate, repetition. You have repeated certain thoughts so many times that they've become your nature. You've spoken certain words so often that they've become your voice. You've taken certain actions so regularly that they've become your identity. And if those thoughts were rooted in doubt, if those words were soaked in fear, if those actions were born from hesitation, then what do you suppose you've become? Let me speak this plainly. You are not your circumstances. You are your patterns. And what you repeat, you reinforce. This is not poetry. It is not theory. It is law. The subconscious mind, the seat of your habits, your instincts, your responses, it does not judge. It does not reason. It does not question whether something is true or helpful. It simply obeys what is given to it most often, and with the most emotional weight. That is why you can no longer afford casual language, why you can no longer joke about your dreams, why you must no longer flirt with doubt. You must speak power. You must act in power. You must repeat power until it becomes automatic. Let me bring you back to Henry Ford, who once said, "Whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right." What was he doing? Autosuggestion, programming, training the subconscious not with theory, but with belief repeated as law. Ford didn't just say it once, he lived by it, he walked it, he enforced it, not just in his mind, but in the environment around him. His factories were organized around rhythm. His vision for the Model T was not achieved by wishful thinking. It was the byproduct of relentless repetition. Repetition in engineering, repetition in production, repetition in leadership, until what was once impossible became standard. Thomas Edison was no different. He did not create the light bulb because he was a genius. He created it because he repeated failure without letting it redefine him. He tried and failed 10,000 times, but every failure was processed through a mind that had already decided, this will work. And when you've already decided, when you've repeated that belief so many times that it becomes part of your nervous system, you stop reacting like a man who is uncertain. You act like a builder. You walk like a man who knows, because repetition creates rhythm. Rhythm creates identity. Identity creates results. Let me ask you this. What do you say to yourself when you're tired? When you're frustrated? When no one is watching? Because that, not your goals, is your programming. You can have the greatest aim in the world, but if you are repeating weakness, your subconscious will sabotage the journey before it even begins. But if you begin today to repeat strength, everything changes. You speak power, even when you feel small. You move decisively, even when you're unsure. You hold your posture, even when no one is looking, not because it feels natural, but because you're installing a new nature. This is the part most men skip. They hear the ideas. If they get inspired, they feel the energy of the moment. And then they return to their old speech, their old posture, their old identity, and wonder why nothing changes. Let me make this unmistakable. Change is not emotional, it is not motivational, it is repetitional. You become what you say the most. You become what you rehearse the most. You become what you tolerate the most. So if you truly want to rise, if you truly want to leave fear behind, if you truly want to become unrecognizable, you must become relentless about what you repeat. Every morning, I am focused, I am powerful, I act without hesitation. I do not drift, I do not shrink, I do not ask permission. I lead my mind, I lead my time, I lead my destiny. And every night, you repeat it again. You do this not because it feels magical. You do it because it rewires your operating system. Repetition is how the greatest men I ever studied forged their strength. Andrew Carnegie would rehearse his chief aim daily and demanded that those around him do the same. He knew the mind was malleable. He knew you could train belief, and he refused to let a single day pass without feeding it. This was not superstition. It was strategy. The same way you build muscle in the gym through repeated motion. You build strength of mind through repeated thought. And every word you speak is a rep. So be intentional. Be militant. Stop telling stories that weaken you. Stop repeating phrases that make fear your companion. Stop allowing casual thoughts to shape your sacred destiny. Say this now with force. I repeat what I want to become. My thoughts are not suggestions, they are commands. I do not rehearse fear, I install faith. This is the work, not once, not when you feel like it, not when the world gives you a break. Every single day. This speech, and the one you are listening to now, is not a message. It is a mirror. And it will only change you if you return to it, repeat it, install it. The greatest breakthroughs of my life and the lives of the men I studied did not come from hearing truth once. They came from repeating it until there was no space for anything else. That's why this must become your new habit. Wake, repeat, fall, repeat, doubt, repeat, win, repeat. Because repetition is not just how you build belief, it's how you seal it. And once it is sealed, fear has nowhere left to land. So go back to the beginning of this speech. Not tomorrow. Today. Play it again. Speak it out loud. Etch its words into your posture, your breath, your silence. You are not weak. You've just been repeating weakness. But from this moment on, you will only repeat strength. Now let's continue and install the next layer of mastery. There comes a moment in every man's life when the waiting must end. Not because the conditions are finally perfect, not because the fear has disappeared, not because the path is finally clear. No, the waiting ends because the man decides. He decides that enough is enough, that drifting is death, that delay is defeat, and that life in its richest form belongs only to those who move. You see, fear doesn't need to be strong. It only needs you to wait. Every moment you delay, every plan you postpone, every dream you shelve for later, that is fuel for fear. Because fear feeds on pause. It doesn't need to overpower you, it just needs to outweight you. But the moment you move, even if it's a small step, the balance shifts. The moment you decide, not with your lips, but with your actions, fear begins to lose its grip. Let me take you to a story you may not know. A moment in the life of Charles M. Schwab. Schwab had already risen through the ranks under Andrew Carnegie, had already proven himself a leader of men. But when Carnegie wanted to merge several steel companies into what would become U.S. Steel, a deal worth over $400 million, a sum so vast it was nearly incomprehensible in his time, Schwab did not flinch. He delivered a speech to the other men of industry with such clarity, such resolve, such decisiveness that it silenced the room. Not because he had all the answers, but because he had chosen his posture. He had decided his tone. He embodied certainty. Carnegie later said that Schwab's speech was the single most effective presentation he had ever witnessed, not because of technique, but because of tone, because of movement. Because Schwab did not wait for the perfect words. He acted. You must learn from this. Delay is deception. Waiting for motivation is like waiting for a fire to light itself. It doesn't happen. The spark begins with you. You must light it through motion. Let me speak now to that project you've delayed. That vision you've parked on the side. That thing you said you'd do once everything settles down. That's the thing you must start now, not later. Now, because once you begin, something magical happens. The mind that was clouded by fear begins to clear. The energy that seemed absent returns. The strength you thought you didn't have starts to move through you. Because clarity doesn't come before action. Clarity comes from action. This was true for Thomas Edison. Do you imagine he waited for a lightning bolt of certainty before inventing the light bulb? Number. He tried. He failed. He moved again, over and over, 10,000 times. He didn't wait for a guarantee. He acted until it worked. And that, my friend, is the secret. The men you admire, the ones who built fortunes, the ones who changed history, they were not fearless. They were just sick of waiting. Abraham Lincoln could have waited. He could have delayed the Emancipation Proclamation until the war had turned fully in the Union's favor, until the political tides had shifted, until every critic had been silenced. But he didn't. He wrote it. He spoke it. He moved. Why? Because he knew the cause was greater than his comfort. He knew that history would not remember the man who hesitated, only the one who decided. And now I turn that mirror back to you. How much longer will you wait? For the right day? For the perfect mood? For someone to give you permission? Let me offer you something better. Authority. Not granted to you by another man, not handed down from some institution, but chosen, declared, rehearsed, owned. You give it to yourself. Say it aloud now. I no longer wait for ideal conditions. I create the conditions. I do not wait for fear to leave. I move anyway. My life is built on decision, not delay. Now breathe that in. Let it settle into your body. Let it take root. Because the man who moves without waiting becomes untouchable. While others hesitate, he builds. While others flinch, he walks forward. While others fear regret, he becomes the kind of man who will never have to feel it. Understand this. There is no power in potential, only in progress. Your ideas are not the source of your future. Your execution is, and execution begins the moment you stop asking, "Am I ready?" and start saying, "It's time." Let me repeat that again, because repetition is power. You do not become ready by thinking. You become ready by moving. You do not become fearless by waiting. You become fearless by acting while afraid until fear can no longer keep up with you. This, my friend, is your turning point. Not because you feel something new, but because you do something new. And when you look back on this day, years from now, you will remember not the inspiration, but the decision. The moment you chose movement over safety. The moment you declared, "I do not wait, I act." Say it now. I move first, I move fast, I do not flinch. And then prove it today, not tomorrow, now. Because the man who acts in the face of fear becomes the man that fear can no longer reach. Let us now continue into the next great principle that will seal this transformation, the one that turns action into destiny. Let us speak of purpose. And what happens when a man aligns his every move with a reason greater than himself? There is a force stronger than fear, stronger than failure, stronger even than pain. It is the one thing that keeps a man upright when the storms howl, when the world doubts, when the road gets long and the soul grows tired. That force is purpose. You see, fear only survives where there is no clear aim. When a man has no central mission, he is easily distracted, easily shaken, easily led by emotion. But when purpose burns hot in the soul, fear has no room to breathe. Purpose consumes it. Let me make this clear. You do not defeat fear by willpower alone. You defeat fear by falling so deeply in love with your mission that fear becomes irrelevant. This is what every great man I studied understood. Andrew Carnegie did not rise from poverty to become the richest man in America by chasing money alone. Number. He carried with him a purpose to bring steel to every corner of the nation, to industrialize a country, to leave behind a legacy that would outlive his own name. He told me once, "Mr. Hill, a man without a mission is a man already defeated." That statement changed my life. From that moment on, I began to understand that purpose is not a nice idea. It is not a motivational phrase. It is the engine of the mind. It is the fuel of faith. It is the death of fear. Carnegie's purpose was so strong that setbacks became side notes. Market crashes, political opposition, public doubt, none of it could shake him. Because he wasn't reacting to life, he was building it, and you must do the same. The average man changes direction every week. One day he wants greatness, the next comfort. 1 month he's hungry, the next distracted, and then he wonders why fear keeps finding him. But purpose? Purpose anchors a man in fire. Thomas Edison had one purpose, to harness the power of electricity and bring light to the world. He was not playing around. He was not trying. He was not testing the waters. He decided. And that decision powered him through 10,000 failures. Let me ask you plainly, what are you willing to fail at 10,000 times? Because unless your mission is that deep, fear will win. Edison's purpose made him immune to doubt. Each failed attempt was not a reason to quit. It was simply another step closer. That is the mind of a man possessed by purpose. Now let me speak of another, Abraham Lincoln. Lincoln did not govern during peacetime. He did not lead during ease. He led a divided nation through war, through death, through despair, and yet he did not waver. Why? Because he had purpose, a single sacred aim, to preserve the Union and end the moral crime of slavery. He could have waited. He could have compromised. He could have chosen the easy route, but he didn't, because his purpose made fear too small to stop him. You must now find your own. And I don't mean a vague dream. I mean one sentence, one aim, one mission so burning, so permanent, so aligned with who you are, that it becomes the lens through which you see every day, every choice, every step forward. Write it, speak it, repeat it, and then let your entire life bend to it. When you wake up in the morning, your first thought should not be, what should I do today? It should be, what action moves me closer to the mission? You're not here to dabble. You're not here to float. You're not here to exist. You are here to build. Say it now. My life is governed by purpose. My energy is directed. My actions are aligned. Say it again. I do not drift. I do not delay. I live with mission. This is how you make your mind fear-proof. You don't simply resist fear, you replace it. You give your mind something stronger to focus on. That's the secret. A distracted mind will always find fear. But a focused mind becomes unstoppable. Let me tell you about Charles M. Schwab again. He was not born the smartest man in the steel industry, but he carried purpose with him like armor. That's why Carnegie chose him, not for his skill, but for his clarity. When Schwab spoke to his men, he didn't just give orders, he transferred belief, he spoke from purpose and into purpose. That's what made him a leader. That's what made him immune to fear. Now I turn to you. What will your life revolve around? What will you build? Who will you become? Not someday, not eventually. Now, because the clock is moving, the world is spinning, and every minute you spend drifting is a minute you will never recover. Say this with me, I live from purpose. I build from conviction. I am immune to fear because I know why I exist. You do not need to know every step. You only need to choose your direction. The road will rise to meet the man who walks with mission. So walk, and when the storm comes, let it come. You have fire in your chest, clarity in your mind, and a mission etched into your soul. You don't need the storm to stop, you just need to keep moving. Because purpose makes even the fiercest resistance feel like confirmation. You are not a man waiting to find himself. You are a man declaring who he is and watching the world bend to it. Now we arrive at the edge of who you've been and who you are about to become. The man who began this speech may have been tired, heavy, hesitant, caught in the weight of delay, doubt, or defeat. But the man who finishes it, the man you are now, is no longer that same man. You've seen too much. You've heard the truth of your own power. You've remembered what most forget, that greatness is not given. It is claimed, and it is claimed daily. There is nothing more dangerous to fear than a man who remembers who he is, a man who speaks with conviction, a man who repeats power until it becomes his nature. That's what you've done here. But understand this. It does not end when the speech ends. This message is not a one-time event. It is not something you listen to once and expect your life to change. Change does not come from inspiration alone. It comes from repetition, from the daily hammer of belief, from the decision to play this message not once, but over and over again until the words become yours. That is the secret to auto-suggestion. That is the discipline every successful man I ever studied practiced. Carnegie repeated his mission every morning. Ford fed his mind certainty not once, but constantly. Edison rehearsed belief so deeply, failure could not enter. And now it is your turn. You must return to this speech when you rise. You must return to it before you sleep. You must speak these truths until your subconscious accepts them as law. Because the mind does not obey what it hears once. It obeys what it hears repeated with emotion. And each time you repeat this speech, you carve a new identity. Each time you declare these words, you reinforce a new rhythm. Each time you come back to this moment, you take another step into your higher self. You were not meant to crawl through life. You were not meant to drift. You were not meant to break under pressure or hesitate in uncertainty or apologize for your ambition. You were meant to build, to command, to rise. You were meant to become the man others study one day and say he was unshakable. But that man is not in the future. He is not a distant version of you. He is here now. In every decision you make, in every repetition you choose, and in every moment you return to this message. And so I leave you with this. You are ready, not because you feel ready, but because you have decided. And what is decided in faith that will become real in time. Say it now. I will return to this message daily. until it becomes my inner voice. I will repeat these truths until they rewrite my identity. I will not live in fear. I will walk in fire. And then do it again tomorrow, and the next day, and the next. Because the man who returns to power becomes power. Now go, speak less, move more, and repeat until fear no longer recognizes you. Until discipline is effortless. Until belief becomes your very breath.